Good good morning, everyone. I was getting ready to say good afternoon. Um, my name is Cordelza Haynes, and I'm from the class of 78, and in Theo, the class of 11. And it is my pleasure to be able to introduce Dr. Debra M. Bass. I've known Debra. I have to call her Dr. Bass.
Okay.
I have to give her I have to give her all her props. And there's a reason why I think that that's so important. It is important because within the African diaspora, largely writ, the African American, Afro-Caribbean, African diaspora, we don't give each other the recognition. We don't necessarily receive the recognition that is due. And we downplay when we actually accomplish the things that Dr. Bass has accomplished and that others here on this call have accomplished. So one of the things as an EOF director that I encourage our students to recognize is that your accomplishments create a pathway for others to do likewise. Dresden Flynn was the EOF director at the time when Debra and I, as fledgling students, entered Drew University. Debra was much more outgoing than I was. Let's say that. This is her story, not mine. This is her story, not mine. And I could certainly see at that time that as an outgoing individual, a very gregarious individual, that she also had a foundation that allowed her to be able to not only come to Drew, but to stay and to graduate from Drew. That is a particularly important aspect of being a person of color, an African American, or as we say now, a member of the BIPOC community. It's one thing to be able to enter, but it's another to be able to retain and to complete your degree and then to go forward and accomplish much more, because there are various roadblocks. And Debra experienced those as a young woman coming to Drew. She had, though, what I saw then, and as I look back, the inner strength, not only to be here at the university, but to persevere. And although I could talk about all of the degrees that she's earned, as I said, this is Dr. Bass, who is a well-accomplished professor, well-published, has been to Oxford, studied there. I could talk about all of those different things. She's a part of our Black Alumni Association, and she has been an active member as a part of that association. All of those things I could talk about. But the one thing that I believe that has allowed her to accomplish these milestones has been her faith. Many times we don't talk about the spirituality. We separate our spirituality from our day-to-day lives as if spirituality is a Sunday matter rather than an everyday thing, an everyday part of who we are as living, breathing beings. In some circles, we say that we are embodied souls here on a journey. And Dr. Bass's journey has been to engage that spirituality. For her, it's been in the realm of Christianity, It's been in the realm of talking about the Savior, Jesus Christ, and then being able to talk about that in her day-to-day work as a professor, about teaching college students, graduate students, about the theological bases for understanding the scriptural Jesus, but also about the Jesus that she has known. And it's that spirituality which has engaged her everyday life so that she could accomplish so many things that has allowed her to be here. And I wanted to address that because that, I believe, to this day has been the driving spark in her life. And it's also allowed her to be grounded. There are individuals who have a spirituality that is one-sided, so that they are not able to engage the issues that people face in their day-to-day lives, to talk about hunger, to talk about poverty, to talk about depression, to talk about what it takes to overcome, and not just overcome, but to thrive in the midst of life's traumas, life's difficulties, and to thrive even in life's joys. She has been able to meld all of that so that as a professor, as a scholar, she's been able to exemplify that for her colleagues. She's been able to exemplify that light in her personal life. She's been able to exemplify that life in her pastorate. And this is why she is so worthy and deserving of the Francis B. Sellers Award. And without any further ado, I want us all to be able to listen to and hear Dr. Debra M. Bass and her message for us today. Dr. Bass.
And you got me all choked up all that talking about me. Well, first, recognizing the presence of God, who I dwell and have my being. And you're so right. To come to Drew, I had to pack Jesus, or I'd have never survived those 4 years. I'd like to first thank the committee for bestowing on me this honor as the Francis Sellers Alumni of the Year. I had a personal relationship with Mrs. Sellers, and she often invited us to her home for a home-cooked meal and for fellowship outside of the campus because she lived right downtown. I used to get a kick out of seeing her arrive on campus in her convertible Mercedes sports car. Now, you know, us didn't have that back in the 70s, but she had that little jazzy Mercedes convertible sports car, and she would have on her leather pants. Girlfriend was good to go. She was small, maybe about 4 feet and 100 pounds dripping wet, but a larger than life persona. I knew then that I wanted to be just like her when I grew up. Now, coming from a public high school that was 90% African American to one of the top universities in the state of New Jersey can only be the work of a merciful and loving God. When we arrived on campus, I remember my big sister and her best friend, Antoinette, they drove me to the campus so we could see, because y'all had us come early before the semester so we could get a glimpse at what it was like on the campus. So I was appointed a buddy system. I don't know if y'all still do that, but that was just a brilliant system for people coming into a new environment, leaving family and friends home. So there was an upperclassman who would be assigned to a freshman to help with the shock and the transition of college life and academics. And I remember getting all A's and a few B's in high school. And when I got that first C at Drew, I was devastated. Now, my buddy that was assigned to me was a junior, and her name was Jo Butler, which I'm sure y'all know her name well, who also was from Ewing, New Jersey, which is a suburb of Trenton, where I'm from. And we have been friends ever since. Unfortunately, it was the 1970s when I attended Drew University. So I encountered both racism and sexism from my peers and some faculty. However, it was not enough to deter me from why I was at Drew. Because I remember what I put in my yearbook, Philippians 4, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So those who embraced me at Drew became my lifeline. Then my senior year, I was accepted into the Oxford University exchange program, first African American to do that. That was my first taste of traveling abroad. And I have since traveled the world through my work in the ecumenical movement with the World and National Council of Churches. It was while I was at Drew that I received my call into the ministry. I was a sophomore. Originally, as Rochelle can attest to, I was a pre-med major. But God got a hold of me at the end of my sophomore year and said, no, my daughter, I want you to preach my word. So now I am an ordained minister in the AME Zion Church and have pastored in both New Jersey and Alabama for the last 45 years. My, how time flies. For the past 25 years, I have taught in higher education, first Miles College, where my late husband was the chairman of the trustee board because he was a bishop in the CME church, and Miles College is a CME school. Then I went on to Stillman College after I received my PhD in biblical studies at Drew. Again, the first African American to receive a PhD from Drew University. There were many roadblocks, many stumbling blocks. As a matter of fact, I had a man on my committee who said boldly that I would get a PhD over his dead body. And the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me and said, God and I can accommodate you. I have since written 5 books. And I just finished my sixth book last week, which is a modern take on the Old Testament biblical story of Joseph and Jacob. Now, as a widow and the mother of a 25-year-old son, life continues to be full of blessings every day. I never imagined I would be living in Alabama. Then for Drew to honor me with this award brings me back full circle to where it all began. To God be the glory for the things that God has done. And because of the struggles that I faced at Drew, and then I went on to Princeton to do my seminary degree, I am in a compassionate place when I teach students in an HBCU, because they come sometimes from poor schools where they didn't get the kind of education experiences and opportunities that would have made them be prepared for college. But that is why HBCUs are still so important, because we get them in as freshmen and we work with them, we pray with them, we help them learn how to, some of them don't know how to read and write. And it's not their fault. It's because of the social promotion system that they just keep passing the kids through. And we see their GPA in this high name. I said, how did you get an A in this? Well, if you didn't act up in class, the teacher gave you an A. So we work with these students, and we work with them their freshman year. We work with them their sophomore year, and they're required to write papers in every class. We have tutoring. We have all kinds of programs that the government has for minority students and students who have learning disabilities. So by the time they become seniors, they have written a 25-page thesis. They've learned how to cite sources, how to document, how to format a paper. And when they walk across that stage, they know they earned that degree. Nobody gave it to them. So again, congratulations to all of those who have been chosen today and on yesterday to receive this honor of being recognized by Drew University. And to Drew, I say, may God continue to bless you as you continue to reach out to those who otherwise may not have an opportunity to go to college. Thank you for a hand up and not a hand out. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you so much, Debra, Dr. Bass. We are truly appreciative of your words there, and every tear is meant, I believe, for all of those that you have worked with and for the joys in your life as well. You are to be commended for this outstanding work, and it truly epitomizes what Francis B. Sellers stood for, which is why we changed the name of our program to the Francis B. Sellers program, and to just be able to be a light and a beacon for so many others around you and who are coming after you. We are truly appreciative of everything that you are and have accomplished. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Dr. Bass. And this space is yours for another 30 minutes. So please feel free to talk as much as you want. I have to say, I have to cut this out of the recording, of course, but the Francis B. Sellers Award is actually my very favorite award of the Alumni Achievement Awards, because the stories are so passionate and inspiring. And I think that, the conversations that we get to hear and virtually, I think last year's Victor Perez and Andrew Binger from the class of 2013 and all of their classmates had this fantastic conversation that I just couldn't stop recording it about their experience in the ELF program. And I just think it clearly creates a connection and a safe space, for our students. It's just very powerful. I'm sorry, I'm tearing up. I'm going to stop talking and let you talk.
This is absolutely wonderful. If I could just encapsulate your words, this would be great on our webpage. What marketing all of this is, and not just marketing. It truly does represent what Francis Sellers stood for, and I hope somewhere that she is smiling. The one thing that I've learned along the way about her is that she was a tough woman.
Yes.
For those of you who didn't know, she died rather early in life of cancer.
Yeah.
But she was, as Dr. Vivian Bull described, who knew her very well, she was a tough cookie. She described her as. She was someone in her days. She was not only at that time the first EOF director, she was also a director of housing. She was also working in finance. It was a different time at Drew altogether. So that the individual, so that she as an individual had the capacity to make a difference in so many areas for students. So for her to ride that red car and to come out in her leather trousers and dressed to the nines, she was sending a message to all of our students, to all of us, to say, this is me, but that's it. Absolutely. So we want to be able to have this legacy continued. It means so much. And it's what I tell my students, so that when the day comes that I step down from my role, my hope is that the next person coming in will continue that legacy within the office to uplift our students, so that we can have more individuals like you, Dr. Bass, more individuals like you, Ms. Galabert.
Oh, wait a minute! I don't get a doctor.
I'll call you Dr. Galabert. She has, this is not your platform and your story. I would give.
You just said everybody's gonna get their titles in there.
I'm gonna give her the title, Dr. Galabert.
Doesn't she have a JD? She has a JD, right?
She has a JD.
Are you still in the Virgin Islands?
In fact, she is a doctor. She has her terminal degree as a lawyer, working in prestigious firms, and now and having been also and continuing as a business owner. And it's something that we could not have imagined only yesterday. I don't want to say 30 some odd years ago, but these are the hopes and the dreams that others had for us. So the things that both Dr. Galabert and Dr. Bass have accomplished, and Dr. Smithwright, and others on this call, and Dr. Upshaw, we have so many others who have.
Dr. Upshaw is one of my colleagues at Stillman.
Welcome, Dr. Upshaw. I know that you are very, very proud. If anyone wants to add any special memories or discussions about highlights in Dr. Bass's life, this would be a good time if you would like to do so before our time is up. But it's nice to I believe, to give the person their flowers while they can appreciate them.
Yeah.
Because it's just so meaningful. Yes, go ahead.
One of my many favorite memories of Miss Debra here. First of all, let me say, girl, you ain't aged a bit. I want to know what's in your water.
Black don't crack.
Hey, there you go.
Oh, she said it. She said she went there.
Yep, there you go. I was just gonna say, and I don't know that we've seen each other since we left Drew, so it's been a long time.
And I was in Ohio. You came by my apartment in Ohio when I was the executive director of the Ohio Council of Churches in Columbus.
You sure that was me?
Yeah, that was you.
Well, then I guess I'm getting old.
No, don't say that. Don't say that.
Older.
I don't even remember taking her to college.
I mean, you really, and the personality is still there, you know. Heck, one of the things I loved about Debra was I didn't have to be the only gregarious Black woman on campus. I had company now.
Indeed.
And I will never forget Miss Debra coming up to me, and I just remember we always called her Miss Moody. So no offense to Ms. Bass, but Miss Moody is what I remember you as.
That's who I was born
That's it.
That's right. And I remember you coming up to me and going, Rochelle, I might need a little help here. I was like, what's up, girl? She's like, I just got a car that I don't know how to drive. If I remember correctly, it was a light blue Volkswagen Bug.
Beetle, yep.
And it was like an automatic stick shift, and she
Yep.
knew nothing about riding a stick shift. She goes, you know how to ride a stick? And I was like, well, yeah, you know. So for almost a year, it was like driving Miss Daisy, because I would drive her.
And you remember I burned my hand. I burned my hand when I was trying to fry some chicken for some Muslims who were on Ramadan, and the cafeteria had closed. And so I was trying to do a good Christian act, and I was frying some chicken for them in the, you know, we had that little kitchenette in the dorm.
Right,
And I was
right.
pouring the hot chicken back in the bottle, and somebody called my name, and rather than stop pouring, I turned my head and kept pouring. And the hot grease went all over my head and blew it up like a balloon. And,
And you need a hand to work that shift.
and you had to drive me back and forth to trip. Because I
was
could
like,
not
okay.
drive.
But it was like, well, not only she couldn't drive because of the burnt hand, but she didn't know how to drive a stick. But then once I taught her how to drive the stick, she was like, well, I don't mind you driving me around. And I didn't mind driving around because I had no car. And so I was like, okay, I can get around a little bit. And my brothers lived in Trenton, so it was a perfect deal where I could take her to Trenton and I'd go be able to see my brothers, etc. But that little light blue VW, and I'm like, wait a minute. You got a car you don't know how to drive? I don't. Why would you buy a car you don't know how to drive?
It was a gift. See, my father, when you went to high school, if you graduated from high school, my dad gave you a used car as a graduation gift. So I think it was a 72 Katrina Beetle, and it was 74 when I went to college. And so I was just so thankful. Matter of fact, she had to add some extra money so that I could get that year, because she didn't want me to have nothing broke down at all.
That the worst thing to happen would be to have that gear shift go on you.
Oh yeah,
But
and it got me through college. But everybody, once everybody knows you got a car, oh Debra, can you take me here? Oh Debra, can you pick me up? I mean, I was like the campus taxi cab.
But you know what? Maybe it was a good thing that it was one of those stick shifts, because nobody would ask to borrow your car because they couldn't drive it. I was one of the few who knew how to drive a stick shift. And some people say, well, how come you know how to drive a stick shift? I go, I learned on a stick shift on an island with lots of curves and hills. So bring it on, you know. I can manage this without a problem. And it wasn't that difficult to learn once you got the swing.
Yeah, the first 2 years were automatic. It was the last 2 that you had to shift. Are you still in the islands?
We didn't tell nobody that. Huh?
Are you still in the islands?
No, I am in Ohio as we speak. I've been back for about a week.
Okay.
But I didn't want to miss this because I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in decades.
So precious.
And I wanted to make sure I got this chance to see you so that we could attempt to reconnect from here forward and exchange stories about what we've been doing for the past, we won't say how many years, you know, too many years out there. So, but congratulations on it. You look wonderful. And
Yes.
You know, so many of us who went through Drew have sort of similar stories. And as part of the Alumni Association and us talking about that, we've kind of really come up with, there's a common thread there that we need to, you know, grab on and try to make a difference for the younger ones coming up so that they have, you know, less of a difficult time. We know it ain't gonna ever be that they're not gonna have a difficult time.
Right. But
less of a difficult time. And, you know, I would say of my underclassmen, the two of you, Ms. Debra and Cordelza, are probably two I remember the most and ultimately became my favorites. Cordelza, because she was unbelievable. For those of you who know her, she was so shy. So shy. Unbelievable. You wouldn't believe that today. But she was in so the shadow of her roommate.
I can't remember your roommate's name. Who was the roommate's name?
Dorothy Doctor.
Yeah, Dorothy, yeah, she was more aggressive like us, but
Right.
Delza,
right.
she just walked, she had her head down, she was just so quiet. But, you know,
I have to,
And of course,
I have
and then
to jump
Deborah,
in.
when she walked into the room, you knew she was there. It's like, hey, big as bold, I'm here.
And I'll
That's
say
the
this.
family trait. That's the family trait.
I will say this. I think someone else had something to say. If it wasn't for people like Rochelle and Deborah, I almost didn't come back after my first semester. I've never told anybody that, but I felt so encouraged. I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. And
Good
it
for
was
you.
because of those connections. And I said, I have to overcome my own shyness.
And girl, you did. Woo, you did.
So I have to thank you, for just doing that. I've never told anybody that, but yes.
Who is this
Anytime.
Miss Sandra Lorraine?
Yes, this is Sandra Senior Deborah Moody. I'm like Michelle
Oh my
Gallagher. I'm not gonna call you Bass. I'm gonna call you Dr. Moody.
All right.
And absolutely, it's so good to see you. And I usually get announcements from Drew, and like all my announcements, they sort of go in a little pile, and I'll read it later. But when I saw your name, I knew I had to be on, and it's so good to see you. Cadelza, it's so good to see you. Roche, it's
Likewise.
so good to see you. Roche and I
Yes.
connected a couple of years ago when I went to the Virgin Islands on a family trip. She was back in the States and vice versa. But it's so good to see you. And I had the pleasure of being on those trips in the car to Trenton with Michelle driving and Yolande Roach and us sitting in the back and holding each other's hands because Rochelle didn't respect curves.
She thought that she was still on the island. She said,
She
I'm going
thought
to
she
take
was
this
still on
turn.
the island. And it was just a wonderful trip. But just to show you how we go full
Remember that.
circle, my niece is a graduate of Stillman.
Okay.
Deja Monique Stevens, and Deja had you as her teacher. And she told me, she called me up, Auntie, I'm taking a religion class. She completed her MBA last year from the University of Huntsville, of Alabama at Huntsville. But when I saw your name, I said, oh my God, is this remarkable that my college friend, and you and Cadelzia were a year under Rochelle and I, is now your teacher. How remarkable that is. But it is so good to see all of you, and it's so good to see you and to connect. And I'm so proud of you and all you have accomplished, and Godspeed. And you are absolutely right. God first, and everything else will be added on. And I am a living witness to that. And I thank God for the history it drew, because oftentimes, my brother and his wife, Deja's parents, and my nephew, they're all graduates of HBCUs. And so he always teases when he's with his frat brothers, because he's a Q and they're all Deltas. And he always says, oh, no, my sister, she went to a predominantly white, a PWI. And they're like, PWI, predominantly white institution. But I thank God for my education at Drew and the friendships that I formed and the people that I met and your success, because your success is my success. Absolutely. And I do thank God for that experience. And it was wonderful. And we were all united, regardless, Carol, of our class, whether it was graduate students or whether it was undergraduates, we were all one on campus.
And the theological students.
And the theological students, yes.
And we had each other's back.
So many memories. And I'll never forget the Livingston Mall, because Deborah was worse than me. But then I think I caught up with her over the years. My sister calls me Imelda Marcos. So
Deborah had her fur coat.
That's right. Once she got money, we all went to the mall.
I have been delivered from my shopping addiction. Thank you. All I had to do was have a baby, and that cured me.
Lay hands on me.
Oh my goodness. Sandra, you have to put your email in the chat box if you can.
Absolutely.
That would be really great. It's because one of the things that's happened with people when they left Drew, certainly within our graduating year, they left Drew. They didn't have anything else to do with Drew. They didn't want anything else to do with Drew, because it was a very different time, and very many felt traumatized.
Absolutely.
And by
Yeah.
the time they left, they said, I'm done. I have my degree. I'm done.
Yeah.
And therefore, they'd had no other dealings with the university.
10 years
Right.
before I even responded to even a letter from Drew.
You
I
see what
was
I'm
still
saying?
licking my wounds.
Mhm,
Yes, absolutely.
mhm.
But I
So-
think Drew made us tough
I think
because
so.
it wanted us to believe that we were less than. And because most of us had a relationship with God and then developed one with one another, we said, no, we're more than conquerors. So we wouldn't
Exactly.
allow that lie to penetrate our spirits. And so whenever we would get down or you felt bad because you failed the test, we would go to somebody in our same, area, and we would pray, and they would teach us how to study. I mean, it was a collective effort. And then when
Absolutely.
somebody would drop out, all of us would hurt
Mhm.
Mhm.
because we
Absolutely.
knew that we were a family, and if you would just put in the work, you could get over the finish line.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
And you know what, Deborah, it also prepared us for the world of work,
Yes.
for being in positions of supervisory positions and in
Mhm.
leadership positions. And it gave you the
Absolutely.
confidence that you need because, the environments that I've been working in have not been predominantly African-American, and I've been in leadership position. And because of Drew, and like you say, the support and having God and family and knowing what I could do and what my capacity and my capabilities were, it helped me to go forward and not doubt myself. And it enabled me to form little, if you want to call it a clique, but little support groups within that system so that we all support each other, especially as women too, that we all learn to support each other and push each other forward.
Mhm. And
And
I
that
think that.
confidence that Drew gave me is considered arrogance in the South.
Mhm,
Wow.
Yes.
mhm.
For a Black woman to be confident in the South, you are arrogant. And so, a lot of people have been put off because of that, and I said, no, I'm not arrogant. I'm just confident. I know what I want. I know how to get it.
Right.
Mhm,
Exactly.
mhm, mhm.
So people tell me, well, you in the South now, so you have to be a little more timid. I said, no,
No.
timid is not my
Mhm.
first name, middle name, nor last name.
Mhm.
Never was.
It ain't in your
There you go.
dictionary.
There you go. So I think that
Moody's
these
are
are
made that way.
yes.
We used to
This-
call her that. I used to say moody woman, moody woman.
Yeah.
And that was my theme song, Moody
Yeah.
Woman. She changes like the weather. Moody woman, but she got it together. Moody, moody,
Moody woman.
love you.
This is taking us back.
I would
Way
say
back.
so.
Now, Carol, you got to keep us on time now. We'll keep on talking.
You have another 8 minutes. You're good.
Okay.
I love this. I loved it. I am very sorry for your experience as well as
It-
students.
It was prevalent. It was, and that's why even when I have reached out to some individuals who might have graduated in this, EOF started at Drew in 70. So your first class actually graduated maybe 74. Many of those individuals, when they left, their experiences were just traumatic.
Mhm.
And some individuals who graduated with us, some of them didn't make the journey.
Mm.
Some of them just didn't. Some who did have transitioned, have from this life. It was not an easy
Mhm.
task just to be able to make it and then to be able to thrive necessarily afterward. There are so many different stories about what happened to some individuals even after they graduated.
Mhm.
And some of those stories had sad endings.
But
Yeah,
Drew
and
was my first experience
although-
of racism. Because I grew up on the street. We had Italians, we had Hispanics, we had Germans, and
Mhm.
everybody looked after everybody else. And my neighbor could whoop me just like my mama could whoop me. And that was just a blessed, scenario to grow up in, thinking that everybody was equal. So I get to Drew and they trying to make me think I'm less than. As a matter of fact, I developed an ulcer because I did not
remember.
understand how I could be treated like that. Because I internalized it, making myself think that it was my fault.
Mhm. And I will say, and I would, I'm sorry.
One of the things that this pandemic, which has been awful worldwide, but one of the positive things it has done is causing these kinds of interactions to occur.
Mhm.
And Cordelza has set up some situations where it happened more often than one might anticipate in the form of like an alumni discussion, etc. And I was amazed in one of the discussions I was in where what we learned was all of us, all minorities, whether they were EOF or otherwise, all of us had this common thread of having difficult times. Everybody had their own different story. But when we were at Drew, many of us probably thought that we were the only ones having these issues and having these problems. And so what we have learned by having these COVID type conversations, if you will, which I don't think would have happened at all if it wasn't for the fact that we were doing it like this and we could talk from wherever we were at,
Mhm.
to learn that everybody had a story and one more tough and difficult than the other. And that these are stories that almost need to be somehow saved and shared for the,
Yes.
the younger kids coming in so that they understand that when they hit that wall, that they're not alone, that there are a bunch of people out there that got the same kind of issues. And the other piece that we learned, that I'm sharing this so that you guys also know about it, is the one other common thread that screamed out loudly in these conversations, I would say unanimously, every single one of us that went to Drew, that went to whatever it's called or whatever it was called at that time, pre-orientation, that turned out to be the best time of our entire Drew experience.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
the best time.
And pre-orientation, most some of us here will remember, but Carol, you wouldn't know. But Professor Reedy, if he was here, could tell us about it. And God rest her soul, Professor Schmidt, Elfrida Schmidt. These were people who were part of that it was a 1 week orientation, and it brought together people who were EOF, non-EOF. I came out of New York, so you had international students. It was a week where we all were engaged with learning about what that transitional piece to come to college. We lived on campus. We had our big brothers and big sisters, Dresden Flynn and Dr. Reedy organized this, and there were different faculty that worked with us, so that this way, transitioning into the academic year, we had our support, big brother, big sisters, and we continue to do that through the Francis Sellers program, and the conversations that we're having. And I haven't forgotten, Rochelle, I had been moving and other things have happened with the end of the year.
No, I get it.
But
I get it.
we're continuing that because we believe that this is something that we need to be able to create a legacy for our students, regardless of whether they were EOF students at the time or whether they weren't. And to be able to.
That's something the Black alumni decided. We kind of voted that we were going to create this booklet, which would piggyback on what Rochelle is saying, where we would tell our experiences and we would put them all in one book so that students who came in wouldn't think that it was just what they were experiencing, but they would have this resource to say, oh, 40 years ago, they were having the same problems.
Right. So
Yes.
maybe at some point, Debra, we have you come to one of our alumni, EOF alumni meetings, so that this way we can collaborate. I think that would be critical because as I said, at the time, it was EOF, non-EOF,
International.
Latinx. It was international students.
was
And we
international.
and we collaborated.
Virgin Islands.
Yes.
Mhm.
Um,
They